Here she was in January of 2019 as she was gearing up to run for president. This is when John Bolton and Marco Rubio were really pushing regime change. She wrote, quote, "The United States needs to stay out of Venezuela. Let the Venezuelan people determine their future. We don't want other countries to choose our leaders, so we have to stop trying to choose theirs." Here is Tulsi speaking from Honolulu. And again, at the time, she was a Democratic Party president. Donald Trump was the president. She was Democratic Party presidential candidate in the primary. Donald Trump was the Republican incumbent. It makes sense that she would be criticizing Trump. But listen to how she criticized Trump and on which ground she criticized Trump when she made this video.
Now, President Trump campaigned against regime change wars when he ran for president. But now he bows to the wishes of the neocons who surround him, clamoring for regime change wars that he claimed to oppose, this time in Venezuela and in Iran. These powerful politicians dishonor the sacrifices made by every one of my brothers and sisters in uniform, their families, as they are the ones who pay the price for these wars. In fact, every American pays the price for these wars that have cost us trillions of dollars since 9/11. Every dollar that we spend on regime change wars or on the new Cold War and this nuclear arms race is a dollar coming out of our pockets. Dollars that should be used to address the very real urgent needs of our people and our communities right here at home.
I mean, that was pretty emphatic. And she was even more aggressive about it as 2019 unfolded and the Trump administration appeared more serious about regime change in Venezuela. She went on Fox News with Martha McCallum and was interviewed about the Trump administration's attempt to change the government of Venezuela. And listen to what she said then.
Here now exclusively, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, a combat veteran and 2020 Democratic presidential candidate. What's your reaction to that? You heard Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president there.
What we are hearing is an increased saber-rattling intention saying the United States needs to send in the U.S. military now to wage yet another wasteful, counterproductive regime change war. And once again, it's being done under the guise of humanitarianism. When we look throughout history, every time the United States goes into another country and topples a dictator or topples a government, the outcome has been disastrous for the people in these countries. That's why we should use our leadership in the world to try to broker a diplomatic solution, working with countries like Russia that have great influence over Venezuela so that there is a peaceful outcome. Because I can tell you as a soldier, Martha, I've seen firsthand the high cost of war, and pushing for this civil war, pushing for the use of military force will only end up with more suffering and death and disaster for the Venezuelan people. What to speak of increasing these tensions that threaten our own national security. Anytime we're in this situation where you have tensions being ratcheted up and this conflict being pushed closer and closer between nuclear armed countries like the United States and countries like Russia and China.
Now, thus far, I think it is worth emphasizing, President Trump hasn't really changed the regime of Venezuela in any way that is meaningful. I mean, obviously, if you go and abduct the leader of the country, and to some extent you've changed the government, but it hasn't changed the regime. The entire government, other than Maduro, the entire infrastructure, the communist infrastructure underneath Maduro, all in place. The people who run the military, the people who run the police, people who run the finances, the oil industry. The longtime associate of Hugo Chavez and Maduro, vice president, is now the leader of Venezuela, although Trump is saying he's leading Venezuela, but he hasn't done full-scale regime change in a way that a lot of people assumed he would, that they were going to install the opposition, that a lot of people are demanding that he do in both parties. So at least as of now, we haven't had the massive kind of regime change war or operation that Tulsi Gabbard was warning about, but a lot of her warnings apply to even what we've done thus far. Like, stay out of Venezuela. It's not our business. And I have no doubt that Tulsi Gabbard was opposed to this. And now there's reporting today, because a lot of people are wondering, where's Tulsi Gabbard? Michael Tracy, the frenemy of our show, the friend of our show, who spent a lot of time favorable to Tulsi Gabbard back in these years, 2018, 2019, 2020, but has now become an outspoken critic, is indignant. He was going to be on our show tonight. We figured, given the new studio, let's just not try and incorporate a guest, see how it goes. Maybe I'm on tomorrow. But he's very indignant. He thinks Tulsi Gabbard is humiliating herself by being part of a government that's pursuing policies that she didn't just oppose, but that she emphatically objected to. Now, I think you can observe that probably every cabinet minister, every cabinet secretary of every president has to watch the president embrace policies they disagree with. What do they do? And is there immediate obligation to resign, to quit, to denounce the president? Or is it their job to kind of stay in and fight for the things they want? We may have them on and talk about that, but it is an odd position to be in. And now there's reporting that because she was so opposed to what Trump was doing in Venezuela, they basically completely excluded her from the process and the planning. Vice President Vance has sort of denied this. She's pushing back a little bit on it, but clearly she wasn't centrally integrated into the process the way you think she would be, given that she's the DNI. Here's the Wall Street Journal earlier today. Tulsi Gabbard was sidelined from Venezuela planning. Quote, White House officials excluded the top U.S. intelligence officer Tulsi Gabbard from Venezuela planning since last summer, according to people with knowledge of the matter. As President Trump's national security team huddled last week to make final preparations for the operation to snatch Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, Gabbard was posting social media photos of herself on a beach in Hawaii where intelligence analysis that assisted in the overall mission from the analytical side, a second administration official said. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is among the top officials who preferred Gabbard remain sidelined from the discussions, according to two of the people with knowledge of the situation. Gabbard's exclusion from Venezuela planning began last year when Trump grew impatient with Maduro, and White House officials began drawing up military operations to remove him. Very similar reporting from Bloomberg, but a lot of times the fact that there's multiple news organizations saying the same thing doesn't mean it's confirmed. I see this all the time. Oh, look, the Wall Street Journal is confirming Bloomberg's reporting. So often they're just getting the same story from the same sources that are leaking, sometimes truthfully and oftentimes with their own agenda and their own motive. So it doesn't mean it can appear in 8 different outlets. It doesn't mean it's confirmed if it's just all coming from the same anonymous sources, which appears to be the case here. Bloomberg, U.S. spy chief Gabbard excluded from Maduro plan over past views. Quote, the White House excluded DNI Tulsi Gabbard from months of planning to oust Nicolas Maduro because her previous opposition to military action in Venezuela cast doubt on her willingness to support the operation, people familiar with the matter said. The move to cut Gabbard out of the meetings was so well known that some White House aides joked that the acronym of her title, DNI, stood for Do Not Invite, according to three of the people. They asked not to be identified discussing private conversations. Now, I do think it's interesting that there are obviously people in the administration wanting to suggest that Tulsi Gabbard is kind of on the outs. And these are, in some ways, just sort of standard turf wars. But I can certainly understand why administration officials would not want to include her in the planning of an action that she herself has vehemently condemned over and over and over and directed it at President Trump. Let's remember that prior to the Trump administration's decision to bomb Iran, based on the allegation that came from Israel that they were close to developing their nuclear weapon, they were accelerating their nuclear program, Tulsi Gabbard's testimony before the Senate in June of 2025 was constantly used to undercut that claim in a way that enraged a lot of people inside the White House, this I know for sure, who were eager to bomb Iran. Here's that clip that made the rounds.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader
Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
So she said, according to the intelligence community that she oversees and runs, that the intelligence is that they are not pursuing a nuclear weapon. They are not pursuing nuclear weapons. They suspended it in 2003 and did not restart it. And then that was constantly cited to negate Trump's claim, justifying why he needed to bomb Iran, that Iran was getting very close to pursuing nuclear weapons. Trump was asked about that in June on Air Force One. He was very proud of the bombing campaign. And they asked him, like, your own DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, said that's not true. And here's what Trump said.
You've always said that you don't believe Iran should be able to have a nuclear weapon. But how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
I don't care what she says. So that obviously is indicative of some tension. I'm not really convinced by this claim that Trump isn't close to Tulsi Gabbard. She campaigned with him. She was often on the stage with him during key events. He was very proud of the fact that he had somebody who had been a Democratic Party member of Congress supporting him. She's the kind of person he likes. She's very fit and pretty and well-spoken, carries herself very well in the military, strong, tough. And I think there is a kind of good personal relationship there from everything I know. But at the same time, Tulsi isn't the warmest person ever. She's very, very professional. And I think between the caution she expressed about Iran, and that was her job to say what the IC's assessment was, that in a way that undercut arguably Trump's most important foreign policy of 2025, which is bombing Iran, the one of which he's proudest. According to the New York Times, which just interviewed him, he keeps a copy of the B-52 bombers on his desk because he considers that such a crowning jewel of his presidency, the bombing of Iran. The fact that she was saying things that undercut it, intentionally or not, I'm sure didn't sit well with him. And then the fact that he ordered a military conflict in Venezuela that she had constantly denounced. I'm not saying I believe these reports, but I certainly think she's in an odd position. And you can understand why planners in the highest levels of the Trump administration would not want to include someone who's really not. The DNI is in an odd position. It didn't even exist until after September 11th attack. It was one of those things like Homeland Security that was built when they exploited 9/11. And it was kind of a bureaucratic layer placed on top of the entire intelligence agency. So it's not like she's crucial for planning military operations, not part of the Pentagon. But she is the chief intelligence official. And obviously you need good intelligence if you're going to do something like go into Venezuela and take out Maduro by abducting him from the military base where he lives. So to exclude her would be a pretty unusual and drastic step, but I guess it makes sense. I've been wanting to do that the whole time. I just allowed myself. I guess that makes sense if you're going to have that kind of planning, knowing that someone might be there to argue and push back against it. So we'll explore this a little bit more. I'm going to try and do some of my own reporting on how much of this is true, on exactly what happened, but it's certainly an interesting tension. And I think also illustrates the fact that there are a lot of people who joined Donald Trump's campaign and the MAGA movement based on an expectation about what their foreign policy would be, only to find the foreign policy is drastically different. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.